Some men do not just fall into darkness, they court it. They taste it first, then return for more until it becomes their only source of power. Prophet Josiah Adeyemi was one of such men, not born evil, but seduced by power until he willingly embraced the depths of corruption. He did not begin his journey wearing a collar of darkness. He learned to wear it when he discovered how easily people bowed to miracles. He began humbly in Ibadan, serving in a small church as a young choir leader with big dreams and restless ambition. His voice carried the kind of emotion that made worship feel personal. He could make people cry without hurting them. He could hold a congregation in silence with a single note. He had a gift, but gifts alone do not build ministries, and Josiah knew this. He despised smallness. He despised obscurity. He believed he was born for more, and when he bowed before God and prayed for elevation, he wanted it by any means necessary. But elevation does not always come from where we expect. Sometimes it comes wearing a smile that hides a knife. That was how Josiah met Baba Karim, the herbalist who would open the door of blood to him. Baba Karim was not an ordinary herbalist. He was a spiritual merchant, a trader between worlds. He sold success, wealth, and power the way a market woman sold vegetables. No sentiment, only trade. Josiah found him when he ran out of patience. He had been ignored by church leaders who thought he was too ambitious. He had watched less talented singers rise before him. He had seen ministers open churches and attract crowds while he still struggled. He was tired of being ordinary. One day, driven by anger disguised as hunger for destiny, he went to the man people said could open doors. And indeed, Baba Karim opened a door, or rather, he opened a grave. The old man looked at Josiah the first day he came and smiled knowingly, as though he had been expecting him. He asked no questions about why Josiah had come. Instead, he told him what he wanted. He told him he wanted influence, prestige, wealth, a church that would grow like wildfire, and a name that would echo across the nation. Josiah was stunned. He had not spoken a word. Baba Karim simply smiled and told him that there are two types of power in this world: power that waits and power that takes. Power that waits is from God, and it grows slowly like a tree. But power that takes is from darkness, and it rises fast like smoke, but it always leaves a smell behind. That day, Josiah made a choice that would shape his destiny. He chose speed over process. He chose power over purity. He chose the throne without the cross. And darkness welcomed him with open arms. The ritual was simple, deceptively simple. A covenant sealed with lust, a transfer of glory through intimacy. It was explained to him that women carry destinies in their wombs, and intimacy is not just physical, it is an exchange. Through sexual contact, one can harvest spiritual virtues, glory, favor, grace, destiny. The more women he slept with, the more spiritual energy he gathered. The more covenants he made through intercourse, the stronger he would grow. The price, however, was that the women involved would lose a part of themselves: fortune, peace, marriage, progress, or even life. But what did Josiah care? Sacrifice was the price of greatness. That was what he told himself. Baba Karim gave him a small black calabash filled with oil and a ring carved with strange markings. He was instructed to anoint himself before every service and to wear the ring whenever he wanted to pull someone under his influence. He was warned never to go more than 7 days without intimacy with a woman, or his power would weaken. And above all, he must never fall in love. Love would break the covenant. Josiah accepted the terms and walked out a different man. He had made a pact with darkness, and in return, darkness gave him something priceless: the power to attract, an irresistible aura, a magnetic glow, a voice wrapped in spiritual seduction. Wherever he stood, people were drawn to him. Wherever he ministered, hearts opened. He discovered that he could now read minds, manipulate emotions, and bend people's will. He became dangerous. Within 6 months, he outgrew the church he served under. He launched his own ministry, Divine Light Fire Ministry, and within a year, his congregation tripled. People came from Lagos, Abeokuta, Oshogbo, Ilorin, and Benin just to worship there. They didn't know that while they saw God, darkness sat quietly behind the altar feeding on their souls. Josiah built his church like a kingdom. He installed air conditioners, stage lights, professional speakers, and LED backdrops that displayed colorful graphics during worship. He invested heavily in appearance because he understood something most pastors ignored. Presentation is the language of influence. Before people hear your message, they must see your glory. That is how he built trust. That is how he gained loyalty. That is how he made people give. Every service began with worship that felt like heaven had descended. The choir was excellent, but Josiah was the crown jewel. When he took the microphone, the world stood still. His voice was rich enough to break fear and sweet enough to melt pain. Videos of his worship sessions flooded social media, and people began to call him the golden voice prophet. But behind every note was a mystery. During worship, he wasn't just singing, he was harvesting souls. His voice carried enchantments. The oil from Baba Karim made sure of that. Women became his easiest prey. They came to him for counseling, prayers, and prophecy, and he harvested them one by one. Some came broken, some hopeful, some desperate for miracles. Josiah promised them healing, deliverance, marital breakthroughs, and favor. They left his office drained without knowing why. Some lost their jobs, some lost their marriages, some fell mysteriously ill, and some became addicted to him spiritually. But none could expose him. They were spiritually tied to him. And those who tried to warn others either lost their mind or their life. Everything about his ministry was carefully engineered. Testimonies were staged, miracles were manipulated, prophecies were sourced from monitoring spirits. His spiritual power came from one place: ritual intimacy. It grew stronger with every woman that crossed his path, became another thread in the web of his power. Each encounter added to his influence, but also to the weight he carried without knowing it. The oil, the ring, the rituals, they fueled him, yes, but they could not protect him from the consequences that some bloodlines carried. Consequences even Baba Karim could not predict. Naomi was 16, too young to understand the wickedness of the world, yet old enough to bleed from its cruelty. She came from a quiet village in Kwara State, raised by a strict grandmother who believed that purity was a family covenant, that no daughter in their bloodline must ever know a man before marriage, or terrible consequences would follow. Naomi never understood what the old woman meant when she said, "Some destinies draw war to themselves." She laughed it off as one of those traditional fears grandmothers carried. She never knew fate would soon place her in the path of a predator. Naomi lost her parents early and was raised under hardship. Despite her struggles, she carried a rare grace. She was beautiful, but not just in face. She had a calm spirit, gentle eyes, and a voice that sounded like hope. When she sang, people listened. She was born with a natural purity that carried strange power, though she didn't know it. Purity is light. Light is energy. Energy is power, and power always attracts either greatness or attack. Her uncle, who lived in Ibadan, invited her to the city to continue her education. That was how Naomi stepped into the world of Prophet Josiah's church. Her aunt had joined the ministry a year earlier and believed the prophet was a true man of God. She dragged Naomi along every Sunday and every Wednesday. It didn't take long before Naomi was noticed, not by the prophet at first, but by the choir coordinator, who heard her singing one day while she was sweeping the church compound. Her voice was raw but powerful. She was quickly added to the choir. From the very first day she climbed the altar to sing, a strange thing happened. The atmosphere shifted. Something ancient rested upon her voice. Something untouched by corruption. A light that irritated darkness. The congregation felt it, heaven recognized it, and Prophet Josiah sensed it. From the moment he heard her sing, he knew she was not ordinary. She carried a kind of untouched grace he had never felt before. He didn't see a choir girl. He saw power, raw spiritual energy waiting to be harvested. He wanted it, he needed it, and he felt something else too. Her innocence repelled him and attracted him at the same time. Darkness always hates purity, yet craves to consume it. That is the nature of evil. At first, he watched her from a distance. He studied her. She wasn't loud, didn't chase attention, didn't wear seductive clothes like some choir girls seeking admiration. She carried humility like a second skin. She had no spiritual ambition, no love for fame, no desire to be elevated. She just wanted to sing. That made her even more dangerous to him. She wasn't desperate. Desperate people are easy to manipulate. Content souls are harder to break. He called her directly. He sent small favors first. An envelope of transport money after rehearsals, free textbooks for her education, a new gown for Sunday service. She was shy, grateful, and unaware. She didn't know predators don't attack suddenly. They groom slowly. He didn't invite her to his office immediately like he did with other victims. No, he built trust first. He softened the soil before planting corruption. He began using her more during worship. He made her lead songs during major services. People noticed her more. Some even said her voice was a revival by itself. She became the jewel of the choir without even trying. In just 3 months, Naomi grew from an unnoticed church girl to the face of worship in Divine Light Fire ministry. And with that rise came attention, dangerous attention. Members began murmuring that she might be the chosen daughter of the prophet. Others believed she had a rare calling. Some envied her. Many admired her. But one person targeted her, Prophet Josiah. Outwardly, he praised her gift like a proud mentor. Inwardly, he prepared to consume her. Prophet Josiah began to appear in her dreams. At first, she saw him praying for her in a glowing white robe. Then, the dreams changed. She saw him standing beside a dark river, calling her to come closer. In another dream, he held her hand and told her she was chosen. Dreams are doors. Once darkness enters, it begins to manipulate destiny. Naomi didn't understand the signs. She thought the dreams were from God. She believed the prophet truly cared for her spiritual growth. That false confidence became her blind spot. One Sunday after a powerful worship session, where Naomi seemed to carry the entire church into a supernatural encounter, Josiah knew the time had come. He could no longer resist the hunger within him, the hunger for the raw purity she carried. But something strange happened when he first attempted to spiritually influence her. He tried to silently tie her through demonic hypnosis, a method he used effortlessly on other women, but it didn't work. Her spirit resisted. Something ancient stood beside her, something fierce, something he did not understand. He returned to Baba Karim. The old man listened quietly and stroked his beard. Then he spoke words that made Josiah uneasy. He said Naomi was guided by an ancestral covenant, a womb protected by ancient fire, a bloodline that did not surrender easily. She could not be taken like other women. There would be consequences. He warned Josiah to leave her alone. But men drunk on power listened to no one, not even warnings. Josiah walked out of Baba Karim's shrine with anger boiling in his veins. How could he walk away? She was the strongest source of spiritual purity he had ever found. If he could harvest her glory, he would rise to a level of power no pastor in Nigeria had ever reached. He would become untouchable. He would control cities. Presidents would bow. Wealth would flow like rivers. He made his decision. He would take her no matter the cost. At first, Naomi thought the dreams were random. She had never been spiritually attacked before. Her life was built on purity and prayer, and she trusted God too deeply to be shaken by nightmares. But these dreams began to grow stronger. They were not normal. Each night came with a new layer of pressure. First, it was just a dark shadow watching her. Then it became a whisper calling her by name. Soon it became a figure reaching out to touch her. Then, temptation began to creep into her thoughts during the day. Strange thoughts. Thoughts that were not hers. Thoughts that made no sense. She would suddenly feel a presence staring at her. She would feel heat on her skin without explanation. Her heart would start racing for no reason, like someone had forced an invisible hand against her chest. When she prayed, her mind wandered. When she worshipped, something tried to block her voice. When she slept, something pulled her soul to a place she didn't want to go. It was like she was being spiritually stalked. She began to notice changes in church too. The prophet's eyes found her too often. He never looked at anyone in worship the way he watched her. His gaze tried to invade her like smoke slipping through a crack. She started feeling disturbed whenever he was around, but she didn't understand why. Until the night he entered her dream. This dream was different from the others. It was not frightening at first. It was calm. Too calm. She found herself inside a beautiful garden with white flowers glowing faintly in the moonlight. A river flowed gently beside her feet. She walked slowly through the grass, wondering where she was. Then she heard someone singing. The voice was warm, familiar. She followed it. There he was, the prophet, dressed in white, smiling gently. He approached her slowly, calling her a chosen vessel. He spoke of destiny, purpose, and divine connection. Everything about him seemed holy. His eyes carried compassion. His smile was reassuring. His presence felt soothing. He told her they were connected in the spirit, that God had joined them for a purpose. He told her she belonged to him under covenant. He told her she must surrender. He told her she must trust him completely. His hand reached out to touch her cheek. The moment his fingers were about to touch her skin, she felt a violent pull from behind her, like someone yanked her away. She stumbled backwards and fell, and before she could recover, the peaceful garden vanished. The sky turned black. A roaring wind filled the air. The prophet's smile disappeared. His white robe turned dark. His eyes became red, ancient, cold, predatory. The dream shattered, and she woke up with a scream. Her heart pounded, her hand shook. For the first time, she felt fear, raw fear. Something was wrong with this man. She did what she had always done. She dropped to her knees and prayed. But that night, when she called on God, her room filled with a cold wind. Something unseen was fighting her prayer. It was like she was speaking into thick darkness. Her voice broke. Something pressed against her chest. She struggled for breath. Then she whispered one word, Jesus, and peace returned. Her eyes filled with tears. The battle was no longer hidden. It was now visible. It was real. She fasted for 3 days and prayed for clarity. And on the third night, she received revelation. She saw a vision of him, not the smiling prophet, but a man kneeling before a dark altar. A red cloth tied around his waist, strange symbols drawn on the floor, candles burning around him. Women's faces floated in the smoke above him, the faces of women he had used, broken and drained. He lifted a bowl filled with a thick, dark liquid and poured it over a wooden object carved in the shape of a woman. The moment he did, voices screamed, voices of women trapped in spiritual captivity. She fell to the ground weeping, not for herself, but for the others. The women who trusted him, the daughters who cried alone, the married women who lost everything after sleeping with him, the sisters who could never explain why life suddenly collapsed around them. His victims were many, yet no one could prove anything. And now, he had chosen her. But what he didn't know was that she was chosen too. Not by him, by a covenant older than his altar. A silent voice spoke to her heart that night, firm yet calming.
Do not fear. You will not fight him with emotion. You will not fight him with strength. You will fight him by covenant. But before victory, there must be sacrifice.
Naomi did not know she was born into a bloodline that was not ordinary. Her village was small, ancient, and feared by neighboring clans. Her people came from a long priestly line, custodians of sacred covenants that had survived for centuries. Her great-grandmother was the last woman of their lineage to carry the full mantle of the ancestral oath, a covenant made generations ago to preserve purity at all cost. In their family, virginity before marriage was not just morality, it was a law. It was the last gate protecting a spiritual treasure buried in the bloodline. Every daughter born into Naomi's clan carried a light from birth, a destiny gate. That gate was both a blessing and a trap. If a girl gave herself willingly outside marriage or broke the rule of covenant by her own lust, she would die. But if a man forced her, deceived her, or cunningly defiled her innocence, the covenant would judge the man instead. He would die, painfully and without mercy, and there would be no place to run. Those who knew the law feared it. Those who mocked it paid with blood. But Naomi didn't fully know the weight of her inheritance. Her grandmother had warned her to stay pure, to stay hidden, and to avoid men who carried darkness disguised as light. But she never explained why. She only cried when she warned her, as if she saw today coming. Now everything made sense. The dream, the spiritual attacks, the dark altar. It was not random. It was not a coincidence. She had been hunted from afar. She had been tracked. She was a target, and the predator was the prophet. He was not just after her body, he was chasing her spiritual gate. He thought she would be another vessel to drain, but he did not know her virginity was not ordinary. He did not know it was protected by fire. He did not know there were taboos. You do not cross without being buried by them. He did not know her body was a covenant trigger, and he was walking straight into death without knowing it. He made his next move suddenly, aggressively. He summoned Naomi to a closed night vigil, not a public one, a private one. He told her God had revealed she was under spiritual attack and she needed deliverance. He said she must meet him at church by 11:45 p.m. for a special prayer session. He said it must remain confidential. She agreed, calmly, quietly, without resistance. But inside her spirit, she was ready. Her battle had begun. That night, she arrived exactly on time. She didn't wear perfume. She didn't dress beautifully. She wrapped herself in a long gown and carried a small Bible. Her eyes were calm. She stepped into the church auditorium and found it empty, silent, too silent. He was waiting. He smiled like a serpent in priestly robes. He walked loudly in tongues, walking around theatrically, projecting power. Then he began speaking about destiny, about spiritual coverance, about how intimacy could transmit anointing. He shifted gradually, word by word, breath by breath, until his speech became poisoned. He began to touch her hand, slowly, softly, seductively, like a snake curling around prey. He told her it was a covenant night. He told her God wanted to join their destinies together. He told her there was a deeper dimension of power that only flowed through prophetic intimacy. He told her not to fear. Then his true face finally surfaced. He locked the doors. He dimmed the lights. He moved closer. His voice dropped. His charm rose. She felt a force press against her mind again. The same dark pressure that had been haunting her dreams now moved physically. It tried to seduce her, to weaken her, to pull her into his web. For the first time, she felt her knees shake. She felt trapped inside her body as he came closer and closer and closer. But she did not fight. She let him touch her, because tonight was judgment night and the covenant was waiting. He mistook her stillness for surrender. He thought he had finally broken her resistance. He did not know that some silences are not weakness. Some silences are traps. He whispered fake prayers as his hand slid across her back. He spoke in tongues that were not from heaven. He pressed his weight against her slowly and tried to lead her toward the couch beside the pulpit. The same couch where he had ruined many destinies. The same couch where hopes died. the same couch where glories were stolen. He tried to kiss her. She did not move. She did not scream. She simply looked at him, straight into his eyes, and for the first time in his life, a woman's gaze made him step back in fear. Because her eyes were not empty. Something ancient was awake inside her. She stood up slowly, calmly. Her voice was quiet, but her words carried judgment. She didn't shout. She didn't panic. She didn't beg. She simply reminded him. Covenants answer to covenants. He froze. Something heavy entered the room. A violent tension filled the air. He tried to speak, but his throat tightened. He stretched his hand toward her to push her down by force, but the moment his fingers touched her skin, something like lightning traveled through his body. He screamed. A force he could not see gripped him. He staggered back and fell to the floor. His body began to shake violently, like he had been struck by thunder. His voice changed. His chants changed. Fear crawled up his spine. He tried to call his demons, but they did not come. He tried to invoke his altar, but it did not answer. He tried to rise, but he could not move. He began to beg, but it was too late, because the covenant had already opened. Pure bloodlines do not speak twice. A taboo had been touched, and judgment does not negotiate. He crawled on the floor, weeping, confused, terrified. He did not understand why his powers were useless. He did not understand why his rituals had failed. He did not understand why his darkness could not swallow her light. And then he saw her blood. Just a tiny drop. Just one drop from a small cut on her palm where his nail had scratched her when he grabbed her by force. That one drop was enough. Covenants do not need volume. Covenants need contact. The earth trembled. He screamed as an invisible chain yanked him backward. His body lifted and slammed against the altar. Candles fell. The pulpit shook. He tried to run, but his legs refused him. His voice grew hoarse. His charms shattered like glass. He finally saw the truth. The girl he thought was prey was a gate, and he had just thrown himself into ancient judgment. He begged her for mercy. He stretched out his hand toward her for help, but she did not move. Her face was no longer soft, her eyes no longer gentle. She had become something else in that moment, an instrument of justice. He coughed blood. The covenant had begun to feed. He would not escape death. He felt his chest tighten, as if unseen hands were crushing his ribs one by one. He rolled on the floor, groaning, cursing, pleading, yet nothing could stop what had already been summoned. Who are you?" he gasped, blood dripping from his mouth. She finally spoke. "I am not here as a woman. I am not here as flesh. I am here as covenant." Her voice echoed, layered with something eternal, something older than language, deeper than blood. The light around her began to pulse like a heartbeat. Invisible forces bowed before her presence. He shook his head violently. No, I made sacrifices. I built altars. I traded souls. I command principalities. I am feared in the spirit realm. As the last echoes of judgment faded, his body crumbled into dust, erased from the earth like a name never written. The altar he had built with blood and deception shattered, and the darkness he once commanded devoured itself. Naomi stood still for a long moment, breathing in the silence. She did not weep. nor did she rejoice. Justice had simply taken its course. She walked out of the sanctuary and into the dawn, leaving behind the ruin of a fallen false prophet. From that day, Naomi disappeared from the eyes of men, but not from destiny. Some say she returned to her sacred lineage. Others claim she became a voice that restores broken altars. But one truth remained. Her story became a warning. Do not touch what carries a covenant.